Greetings survivors and friends, SHADOWFRAX here with another in-depth analysis of the weekly Rust update, and now that all servers have been pinned down and forcibly wiped into submission for the month, what new wonders await us? Well, first of all, we need to address the flying elephant in the room, which is that after a countdown lasting over 3 months, the rocket launch site monument has touched down spectacularly. If you've been watching my videos, you'll know more or less what to expect here, but I can now finally take you on a guided tour of what is arguably the biggest, hairiest, and most complex monument on the whole damn island. There are 3 main areas: a huge factory/rocket box, the warehouse and office complex surrounding it, and of course the end where all the action happens, the launch pad itself. Starting with the factory, you can't fail to miss the humongous central display, a giant Airfix rocket kit partway through being assembled, and the scaffold surrounding it can be scaled as just one of a few different possible routes to the top. If you're feeling traditional, for instance, you might want to take one of the lifts. Well, at least part of the way. No matter how you get there though, once at the roof you'll find a crashed heli surrounded with loot, and in particular a brand spanking new elite tier crate which should contain the most decent booty. Outside the factory, one half is dominated by silos and warehouses containing various loot spawns. There's a recycler here too for the environmentally friendly amongst you, and the other side houses the office complex. The furniture delivery chaps have yet to turn up, so they currently look a tad Spartan, I'm afraid, but my favourite feature is the air ducts, which riddle the place and allow for sneaky travel between floors for those of you who don't mind the odd tight space. Again, once at the top you might well find another elite loot spawn, so definitely worth checking out. Lastly, we have the launch pad, which I think takes the prize for the most maze-like section of the monument. Not only is there another rocket scaffold to climb, but down below you'll find a veritable warren of tunnels and rooms to explore, with a particularly devious jump puzzle sitting between you and the best of the loot. The drop slide's quite good fun as well. A lot of work went into this one, as I'm sure you can appreciate, but that doesn't mean it's 100% polished. It may still have a few wrinkles and creases to iron out, and you should expect something much closer to perfection come next forced wipe. New month, new dungeon, and a new feature too, introducing the hobo barrel. From a distance it might look like your common or garden loot container, but chuck in some timber, add a spark of life, and you've got yourself a roaring fire that will not only cook food and melt cans, but also gives 100% comfort. These are static, indestructible, and can be found now at the new launch site and lighthouses. Particularly handy for defrosting your chipolata after a brisk and chilly swim, but be warned, with great warmth comes great responsibility, and don't be surprised if others are drawn to them like moths to the proverbial flame. Albeit fully geared moths with AKs. After last week's changes to resource gathering, which some of you loved and some of you saw and immediately threw up all over your keyboards, we have yet another round of tweaks. First of all, I think you'll be pleased to hear that driftwood piles on beaches are now finally harvestable and will give you between 125 and 250 wood each, depending on what you use to gather them with. In another major shift, junk piles will now only spawn near roads and power lines, meaning these areas are due to become a lot busier and more deadly. Also, ore node positions have shifted, and they should now definitely only spawn around rock formations, with their distribution having been adjusted, meaning more stone than any other type should be found in the temperate biome. All of this is another step in the direction of making resource gathering more strategic and intuitive, and I'm sure we can expect plenty of other changes in the coming weeks. There were some fixes to ores too. After a slight hiccup last week, metal nodes should now properly yield 2 high-qual ore as a finishing bonus, and, as so many of you very kindly pointed out to me, nodes in caves seem to have missed the memo and were giving out old-school resources in old-school quantities. This has now been fixed, however, and serendipitously it's made Helk think. What if caves were the exception? What if things were better down where it's darker? Nothing specific was mentioned, but watch this space and I'll keep you up to date on this one. Whilst we're down here, and on the subject of making caves great again, restrictions on the smallest 2 building rooms were lifted, meaning you can now utilise the whole area. This makes them a lot more viable, defendable, and hopefully more attractive to live in. Let me know what you think to this change in the comments, please. Elsewhere, as of this update, the airfield now has its own large underground section too. Not only does this complex contain loot, ore nodes and mining supplies, but can be used to get from one side to the other, hopefully without being seen. The way that monuments blend with the surrounding terrain was adjusted too this week, with a smoother transition for some of them instead of them being placed on an obvious plateau. There's more yet to do, but in future they should all end up looking much more organic, and thus much more orgasmic. Grass! Now I've got your attention, yes, we have new grass this week, which looks lusher, more natural, and more grassy. The colour is slightly different, but not too drastic, and thanks to some fancy procedural density and height controls, should be more like what you'd expect from an island devoid of lawnmowers and sheep. Barrels, as of this update, sound more satisfying to hit, and smashing them will now be rewarded with particle effects and more explodey jibs. Item pickups were modified too, with each resource, tool or whatever playing its own sound when yoinked. This adds more feel to looting, of course, but also has implications for stealth, as other players will be able to hear what you're grabbing, so be warned. Something else that I've been mentioning most weeks for a while now has been the ongoing work to improve the Happis Island map. Another chunk of this was merged in this wipe, and there are a whole host of changes, including over a kilometre of new roads, new mines, caves, a large canyon area, and a reworked southern coast, which has now turned into more of a desert. This is not the end though, a lot more is in the rusty pipeline, including new trees, a launch site for the island, map names for pretty much everything, and even a swamp. Can't wait for that. Are you fed up with going down to the shops only to discover they're out of stock of whatever it is you were after? This could be a problem with vending machines in Rust, as some of you may know, but not anymore. As of this update, they'll not only display their contents on the map screen, but also their stock levels. And a bug was also fixed whereby a shop could erroneously be showing as in stock of an item when it wasn't. Now all we need is online ordering and same-day delivery, and we'll never have to leave our bases at all. An exploit with the chopper was plugged also this week, whereby under certain circumstances it could become stuck in mid-air and thus an easy target. Also, admins spectating it should now have an easier time of seeing where it's aiming. In the F1 console, you can now press tab to execute a quick autocomplete, handy, and there was also a fix for that weird player spine rotation thingy with distant models, as this video shows quite nicely. Over to works in progress now. There's not much to report on the new AI scientists, unfortunately. As I mentioned last week, there were some issues with getting them to work properly with nav meshes, and Helk has now handed this over to another member of the team who's a bit more of a specialist in this area. Ongoing cosmetic changes to skin textures can be seen here. Work's being done to greatly improve the tones of both light and dark skin, and view model files are being reorganized in preparation for us being able to see our actual arms and clothing in first person. Lastly, this. And before you jump to conclusions about exactly what this picture's trying to say, let me just deflate your expectations by telling you that the chap here is just forgetting the correct scale and no indication that we'll be wearing backpacks anytime soon. Sorry. You see, after the change last week to make corpses despawn into backpacks, a new model was needed, as the current one's actually from Legacy. Much nostalgia, very backpack, so loot. No news yet on the final look or indeed colour, but stay tuned and I shall keep you in the loop. Spank the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and follow me on Twitch, Twitter, Facebook and the Steam group. I shall see you in the next video or stream, but in the meantime, keep calm and stay rusty. Cheerio.